Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the term toxic masculinity. I've always seen it as a phrase used by people in their 30s who still haven't gotten over being bullied in high school. Still, though, this guy is onto something. This way of defining masculinity as eternal suffering is the biggest setback men have faced since the invention of kicking people in the balls. And it's always the people who can stop struggling whenever they want who romanticize the struggle. If you talk to any of us who are actually in the trenches, who have to keep struggling just to make ends meet, we never view struggle as its own reward. Our feet are still planted firmly enough on the ground that we either see it as something to be defeated and moved on from, or a prison that we've resigned ourselves to, depending on how much fight we have left in us. The people who intentionally seek out struggle are always the ones in positions like Sean Strickland, where it's been quite a while since the last time they've had to double and triple check to make sure their basic needs are going to be met. It reminds me of that one experiment where it was shown that people can tolerate more pain if they know they can put a stop to it at any time. It's always a line of thinking that comes from people who are rich enough that they have the luxury of being bored with comfort. They've forgotten that a comfortable and happy life was what they were working so hard for in the first place. That continued struggle just to still be unhappy makes about as much sense as joining the army for a nation that will never truly be your home. Sean, I guarantee that if your past self, growing up under awful conditions and wanting a way out, heard your current self telling him to give up on happiness, it would demotivate him in a way that would knock him off the trajectory that made you successful. People buy into this fallacy that your manhood is defined by how well you can passively endure pain. It's pure delusion, and I suspect it was started as propaganda by those who benefit from exploiting workers and keeping their standards low. Manhood isn't about enduring pain. Why would it be? On average, women are the ones with a higher pain tolerance. Being a man is about being enough of a threat to dissuade people from trying to cause you pain. You see, masculinity is like armor. When used properly, it helps deflect negativity. Criticism from haters, attempts to intimidate you or undermine your confidence, they'll all bounce off you and not get internalized if you're wearing this armor properly. However, just like with armor, if you're wearing it improperly, it can restrict and burden you more than it protects you. A lot of this stems from stoicism, a philosophy that's already mediocre, being filtered through the perspective of people who don't have the intelligence to understand it. This reduces it to nothing more than a weaponized lowering of standards. Besides hustle culture idiots, do you know who tends to be the loudest proponent of men thinking this way? Women who hate us and see us only in terms of our utility. When you embrace this blind, self-sacrificing mentality, you objectify yourself. You see yourself as nothing but a tool to be used until it breaks. If happiness is this far out of reach for you, you're in no place to be prioritizing others. That's self-destructive people-pleasing. Deal with your own problems first, and then you can help others from a position of strength. You'll be a lot more useful and a lot more pleasant to be around if you build and grow your comfort zone first instead of trying to live your entire life outside of it and constantly burning out. In a world that wants you to see your worth as a man in terms of how much shit you're willing to eat, prioritizing your own comfort is a revolutionary act. Have the guts to say, no, I'm not anyone's sacrificial lamb. I've spent the last year or two in the trenches, with job security being hard to come by post-pandemic, and my family understands that sometimes they have to let me be a little bit selfish now so that I can bring more money into the household later. By giving myself the breathing room to take control of my life, I can put us all onto a path that makes us happier in the long run. Sean Strickland is the kind of guy who has about a 50-50 shot of either doing something cool or totally embarrassing himself. Sometimes the man is cooking, like when he told people not to listen to Andrew Tate's bullshit, or when he beat up Sneeko. However, sometimes he's just fragile and hypocritical. He has a track record of not being able to take what he dishes out. For instance, one time he came up to Machine Gun Kelly to make fun of him. Sounds good, right? Well, he didn't know that MGK was a creep. He just came up to rip on him for dressing funny, and then afterwards he complained that MGK didn't show him any respect. He's been known to say the most out-of-pocket things about his opponents, but then have a meltdown when they bring up how his dad used to beat him. This is about on the same level as a woman who goes around hitting men but then screams for help when she gets hit back. As a fighter, you should know that if you make the decision that it's time to play dirty, you give up the right to set limits on how dirty the other person plays. Honor is a social contract, not a moral obligation. Rules of honor were never meant to protect those who were behaving dishonorably. Wounded men like Strickland do have some right to lash out, but the rest of the world shouldn't treat this lashing out as something to take inspiration from. That's how you end up with middle-class teenagers with no real problems trying to act like the Joker because they think it's cool. Sean Strickland is right just often enough to make him dangerous for younger guys who don't know when to pump the brakes and stop imitating him. Hating superficiality is cool, but when you get to the point where you're routinely demanding respect that you don't give back, you shouldn't be listened to. As a grown man, I can tell the difference between when he's speaking the truth and when he's simply releasing some of the poison that was put into his mind by his bad childhood. But some kid's gonna take everything he says at face value and end up with an unrealistic worldview. Even Strickland himself would probably miss a lot of the nuance in what I'm saying. I'm sure if someone sent him this video, all he'd hear is, "This guy's talking shit," and then he'd be in about 10 different video clips where he calls me a bitch and threatens to kill me. It's just his style. Everything he says you have to view through a filter of this guy has been hurt so much that he's tricked himself into liking it, and figure out if that could be compromising his judgment on the topic. Anyway, my point is, don't listen to guys who are miserable and have no desire to get better. There are plenty of people who are just as tough and just as accomplished without having to embrace misery as a lifestyle. A life with room for softness and whimsy is worth pursuing. That's the entire reason you need to harden yourself and improve your skills in the first place, to beat the grind.